roll. Chair Tanaka?
Here.
Councilmember Binker?
Here.
Councilmember Lowing?
Here.
For the record, all present.
Great. Okay, let's start the agenda of public comment. Do we have members of the public? And if so, can you call one at a time? 3 minutes.
It appears that we have no requests to speak.
Okay, let's go to this action item. So the first action item is Office of the City Auditor presentation of the remote and full work study report. Does staff have anything that they would like to present?
Yes, we have with us evening Allison Lay, who will present the remote and flexible work study report, and Chimmy Perry, who will present the electronic payment process and controls report. So I'll turn this over to Allison.
And the way I like to run the meeting today is, as you present, if my colleagues have questions, if it's a small group, just to run and say something so that we could start the discussion with a thread that's being presented instead of having to go back. Okay. The other thing is I asked our representative from the city clerk's office to also keep a chart on pros and cons on different items. So you'll see her put that up as well. So once
One that I just wanted to mention before Allison begins that in one of the previous meetings, we had some decisions around the format of the report such that we would minimize your need to kind of flip pages. And so these two reports were already completed while we were having those discussions. So reports forward are going to have entire observation content as well as recommendations and responses all together on this page. Okay.
Since we're being informal, may I just jump in? Yeah, because to me, and though I like the recommendation response charts at the end because that's where the issue joined. And so I still think, I mean, that's where I focus a lot of my comments to see where there was agreement that we don't need to disturb. So I actually like that piece of report, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
actually, I don't know if the city clerk, you actually have print out the actual staff report there as well. Okay. Do we have it? Okay. Okay, can you go look for it and get me, please? Okay, thanks. Okay.
There's something you want with this?
Okay. Allison, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Are we ready on that side as well?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for your time today. I'll start out here with just a quick overview of the objectives and the scope of the project here. So overall objectives for the remote work study were to evaluate the alignment of your remote work policy and procedures compared to best practice. And then also to help you identify a way to assess position eligibility and building a framework for criteria to assess that position eligibility. The project came out, just to give you a little bit of background here. We initiated the project back in right around June of 2021, excuse me, 2022. And as part of this, really, the idea was that you were coming back from remote work and a hybrid work environment to the pandemic. And so wanting to build in what we were hearing was we wanted to build in a little bit of additional structure, see where you're at compared to other organizations, and then build in a little bit of standardization on who was eligible and who wasn't eligible for work. Overall, just a project approach perspective, we primarily spoke with human resources management staff. So we got to work with your HR director right before leaving momentarily, and then also with your interim HR director, who's looks like was recently moved as your current HR director, as well as an assistant HR director. We also reviewed your remote work policy. At the time, it was the telework policy. Since then, it's switched over to a title of a hybrid work policy, as well as the hybrid work agreement form. So just overview quickly of the recommendations, the findings and recommendations that were made in the report. There are 3 findings as a whole, and then one kind of overall opportunity that's included in the back there. We'll go into these a little bit more detail in this discussion, but the finding one has modification recommendations for your remote work policy. Finding two has recommendations to modify your remote work agreement form that the employee signs. And then finding three provides criteria for evaluating position eligibility. And then the opportunity section that is there talk about kind of pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and then post-pandemic market conditions and industry conditions for remote work. As I'm talking through here, I'm going to be using remote work, telework, and hybrid work a little bit interchangeably. Within the report, we stay consistent. As I'm saying, I'm using remote work in a broad sense as far as just eligibility to work remotely 1 or more days a week here. So digging in a little bit deeper than here, we can start out with policy or with finding one. And finding one, as I mentioned, was touching specifically on the your remote work policy. And what we were finding and the key recommendations that we were making in that were to include a 3-month trial basis in your policy for employees to kind of start the remote work policy from a 3-month trial basis, and then we were recommending regular touch bases with that employee, and then having a formal kind of evaluation of how the remote work implementation was going and to assess the continuation of it. We were also recommending in that policy a requirement for satisfactory performance review. Disclaimer for understanding that it was the employee's responsibility to understand any sort of tax liability if they were, say, working out of state as their remote work. Signing an inventory form. The idea that remote work and employee performance should be measured off of employee outputs rather than just employee presence. And they also had in there it's a disclaimer that working from a remote, we're still responsible for arranging childcare, and that there is an ad hoc disclaimer in there that employees can be work on an ad hoc basis outside of like your normal hybrid or telework policy. Overall, the recommendations that we made, purpose behind them was really to mitigate the safety risk. So adding a little bit of clarity as far as expectations, terms in there. You'll notice, so we've got the finding and the recommendation here on the front of the report, and then towards the back of the report, I believe it's 17 of your packet handout. They provided first the Society for Human Resource Management policy, so the professional association that we based our recommendation on. Any of the recommendations that any of the section that we recommended pulling to your policy, they're highlighted blue, so they're easy to see there. The document that after that is your policy that was updated June 2020. And then those items are also in blue there, so you can easily see where we're making recommendations for additions. And then there's also a green highlight in there, and that is pertaining to the recommendation for California labor law. Of just being very clear in there that the employee was responsible for any employees who voluntarily work remotely are responsible for any of their equipment that they purchase, and the V is not responsible for that. I'm happy to jump to those pages if you would like, as part of my shared screen, but I want to, otherwise we can stay here. I would just want to give you kind of overview here.
Why don't you go ahead and jump just to let us know what's going on.
Absolutely. Let me jump on there. All right, so this is page 17 of your packet. You can see it's the Appendix A. So this is the sample policy from the Society for Human Resources that we based a number of recommendations on. And these are the blue sections that I alluded to that we were recommending to pull into your report. The document follows after that is, this was your remote work policy that we reviewed. And then to make it a little easier, obviously it's management's choice for where they're kind of inserting everything, whether or not they were choosing to make the policy additions. We provided examples for them to just a starting point, so they could give for making any additions where it might fit into your policy. From there, here I can go ahead and I will jump over here. Amanda did provide a response with a partial agreement to the recommended policy changes. The key items that they had said that would like to exclude were that 3-month trial basis. They were interpreting that as a probationary period, wanted employees to be eligible from day one, which we agree with, that employees can be eligible for remote work or hybrid work immediately upon hire. Just simply recommending a trial basis so that they know that it's on a trial basis for in case you want to be pulling them back to the office. And the other item they had took exception to was simply the recommendations tracking the inventory the employee would be taking with them to their home office. They said that IT already tracks all hardware assets that are issued, and so tracking it here would be redundant. I'll pause there if you'd like.
Have you finished going over finding one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Do colleagues have any questions or suggestions? Chime in.
Just had a clarification question in anyone where you said close to the one on page 11.
Sure.
Some component recommended by HR during the most recent discussions, and it sort of confusing sentence was discussions with city management resulted in their omission from the final policy. Was that an agreed to omission?
Can you bring up the page numbers? I'll see it.
Yeah, it's page
That is-
10 of your packet.
That's the page on the screen.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, number, but I think that what you are referring to is this little sentence here.
That's right. That's right.
So the policy we reviewed was updated in 2021. And as part of the conversations with the human resources team, they had noted that they'd made a number of different recommendations for this policy, for the June 2021 policy that was reviewed. And that some of the recommendations that included in the policy were omitted out after coordination and collaboration with city managers.
Okay, so it's not a disagreement between you and staff, right?
Correct. Any other questions for by one?
I do have one, but I'm going to see if my
No,
colleagues.
sorry.
Okay.
Just quick, but I think we have to.
No, I just didn't interrupt.
No,
Okay.
go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. I'm looking at package 30, which is a chart of the recommendations and the responses from our staff. And so I note on remote work policy finding that we're discussing that our response was that we partially agree. And one of the things that's slightly different, I think you mentioned staffing exception to the tech policy, the equipment tracking, but it does say here that incorporating an additional equipment tracking commitment into the hybrid work policy would be duplicative and could lead to confusing and contradictory practices. That seems compelling to me. And so my question is, are we resolved on that, or any continued concerns on your part as an auditor?
As long as the inventory hardware is being tracked as far as what's being issued and taken, then excluding that from the policy, I don't have an issue with now.
Okay, and I assume our staff is saying that it is in fact tracked.
Yes,
Okay, great.
yes. And we talked through that and they heard that.
Fabulous. And there's also mention of making sure to implement the periodic review this, and it does say again in the staff response that it will be that the hybrid work policy will be reviewed periodically at a minimum annually. So again, that seems we're in agreement there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm struggling to find where we differ. Now, it could be the sentence, the penultimate sentence in that right column under finding 1 on 30. It's just a little garbled. I can't quite parse it. I'm wondering if perhaps our staff could interpret it for me. I'm going to read it. Says, in regards to including employees on probation, the city did not include this vision as providing hybrid work as an option. may our flexibility candidates are seeking. Could you just interpret for me? Because I think maybe word got out of place there. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Coach Tanaka and council members. Our intention behind this sentence is that, one of the goals is recruitment and attracting talent. And so we didn't want to exclude probationary employees or new employees from ability to work hybrid schedule. And so that's why we were excluding that section of the recommendation.
Okay, so that's what was being referenced earlier about the 3-month thing.
Correct.
I didn't relate this as related to that. Okay,
Yes.
I understand that. Yeah, it seems real to me. I don't have anything further. I don't think there's a lot of discord on this particular finding.
One other thing, which is there the intent to pilot both the sort of what I'll call full-time work at home versus part-time work at home? Are you gonna pilot those, or is it all get the same results?
Not piloting fully remote.
Okay,
There is a exception in the policy if a department director would like to pilot, they would discuss with the city manager.
okay,
But the policy revision or update states hybrid work is 2 days in the office on site.
okay. So our policy is not gonna say if you live in LA, you can stay there.
Now, our policy states that we're supporting a hybrid work schedule, and that means 2 days on site.
Okay, thanks for
Minimum.
clarifying.
Okay, I have a questions. First, I don't know, does anyone know how many people are doing this right now? What percentage of our workforce?
Yes, we have approximately 80 to 90% on site. So in other words, only 10 to 20% on any given day between Monday to Friday are working remote.
Okay, so 10 to 20% are working remote.
Between Monday and Friday.
Okay. Okay. Versus, is there between like Monday through Friday versus 7 to 8?
We didn't
Okay,
do
fine.
survey for Saturday and Sunday.
No problem. And I really like what the auditor said in terms of focusing on performance versus time attendance, because that doesn't make sense anymore with remote work. How that being done, how do we move from kind of a show up kind of measurement to a performance type measurement? Do you know?
Well, I guess, good evening, Chair Tanaka. I guess my question would be, it could help me understand what you mean by our current metric was time and share. I don't know if we would necessarily agree that that
Oh,
was
I
our
thought that's what I think
metric.
that, I thought on I thought that's what was said, was that you were, I guess, initially being more from a attendance type of thing to more, and as the decision was to go towards more of a performance metric. But maybe I'm mistaken, or maybe I heard wrong.
That's why I don't understand what specific, what
Oh.
you're referring to?
6.
If you don't mind me jumping in while you jump
Sure.
over there, yeah, I can clarify that is that it was simply, I think on page, let me jump over to page 17 here. That's one of the items that we highlighted in the study for human resources policy that we're recommending and pulling over into your new policy, was just a note in the policy stating that employees would be evaluated on performance rather than evaluated on an emphasis on performance instead of simply like essentially, excuse me, on performance rather than, as I said, Councilman Member Tanaka, time share. So it was just a re-emphasis that employees should be evaluated on performance that is in here as a note.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. So how do you guys measure performance then?
The city?
The city, yeah.
Sure. So the city and our HR director can elaborate on this, but performance reviews are done annually with employees. Management review process happens every fiscal year essentially. And then for labor employees, it occurs on, or represented employees, I should say, occurs on their anniversary date. And so depending on the job description and or the employee group that's represented by that individual, then they are through a performance on an annual basis.
Okay, and so how has the performance changed as this to 20% has gone? compared to on-site?
The performance management process has remained the same. There has been no change in regards to the process for conducting.
Well, that's not my question. My
performance.
question is, how's performance gone up, gone down, stayed the same? How's it changed with an on-site to 10 to 20% off-site?
Well, I can speak to the comparison between 2022, the prior year, 2021. I mean, we did see an increase in performance exceeding expectations.
Wait, you're saying the performance went up with people off-site, or performance was higher when we're, yeah, I'm trying, which way to go?
Yes. With employees working remote and the hybrid schedule, we did see an increase in expectations, performance expectations. I can't compare before 21 just because I evaluated it for that from that perspective.
But wasn't 21 when the COVID? Wasn't one working remotely?
There was, yes, more employees working remote.
So, wouldn't it be more appropriate to compare again before COVID when everyone's in the office to say now when it's more of this hybrid system going?
As I said, I have evaluated pre-COVID to respond to your question.
Because I think there's a lot of benefits that we get with remote work, and I'm just kind of understand what the effect has been for the city in terms of performance.
So I know that I think at an aggregate level, it's a little bit difficult because we have such a population of workforce that is working remotely. If you think about it, right, we're only having anywhere between 10 to 20% of our workforce on any given day working remotely. So the majority of our work is on premise, so to speak. For those that are working remotely, the managers and the department have been working collaboratively with the employees to adjust work. And obviously, we want to continue to offer this hybrid policy because it is a great retention and attraction tool for us from a employee standpoint. I will say that managers are also dealing with, if an individual isolated issue arises, they're dealing with that with their workforce. So if high working, they continue to support with their employees as long as the expectation being met. And if they're not, then our managers are having those conversations, just like the audit says, to continue the conversation and have with the employee to make sure that the needs and expectations are being met. And if they're not, managers are adjusting it. So for example, if you were to look at maybe 2021 or in COVID time, CSD employees were perhaps in a greater high schedule than they are today. And that's because found that as came back to more in-person activities, they found higher benefit from some of their employees being on site more. So they've made that adjustment. In other areas where you have primarily remote type or individual work, so let's say accountants, they've maintained their hybrid schedule, where it's at 2 days on 3 days off, in large part because it was for their organization and performance. They're meeting their expectations, exceeding them, frankly, and they've adapted. So you don't necessarily have, because we have diverse line of service, each group has had to adjust what works for that line. And that's why you do see only 10 or 20% of our workforce working hybrid.
Okay. So 10 to 20% represents how many people?
Oh, about 100 to 200.
Okay. So, bigger than some companies. Actually, I think that's a pretty good sample size. What I would suggest would be to, and some may be new, so you can't do it, but what I would suggest is that look at the performance for COVID, during COVID, and after COVID for this people that are for this 10 to 20% to see how the performance has changed, and you can compare it against people that have always been on site, and that way you can kind of see how the remote hybrid change has been doing. Because I think if you just compare during COVID and now, you don't really have a comparison because during COVID everyone's remote. Right? So anyways. So I think that's one thing I would suggest for that. But okay, my colleagues, nothing else on. Otherwise, let's go to 2 then.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, just go over number, please.
So finding number 2 is related to making the modifications to the hybrid work agreement form. Again, this was already in existence, and the data version that we were reviewing was from June 2021. Those updates were based off version that we were looking at already had updates that were made to adjust for COVID at the time. The updates that we're recommending to make were to align the hybrid work agreement form with the policy based off of the recommended policy change that we were making. The sample that is in appendix E for you guys, and that should be page 25 of your packet. If you bear with me, I will bring us down there. So this is already the form. The city did already have this form, and the changes that we were recommending are highlighted here in blue. The changes are pulled or based off of the Society for Human Resources Association remote work agreement form, as well as agreement forms looked at from the International Public Management Association of Human Resources. Primary changes that we were recommending. Again, we're referencing for dependent care arrangements, noting that employees do need to report if as directed by their supervisors, they will need to report into the office. Also allowing additional addition there, saying that the city have access to the home office upon request to ensure a safe and secure work arrangement there. And then there's also a couple of items that are related to, again, for agreement for the employee was as far as equipment and a clarity on the expense reimbursement to comply with the California code. I'm going to jump over here for a moment here and go down to the management responses. Management response was a partial agreement with the notes. I believe that the term, the criteria that we're adding in there. I believe that HR felt that the merit rules were already detailed in the existing performance requirement policy. And we're feeling that some of the additions we had in the agreement form were redundant, and that there was interpretation of the criteria that we were making recommendations to add. They were added with a tone of disciplinary reference and directed from the city's performance management process. I'll pause there with any questions.
I have one if it's all right. So before you came down to my favorite slide here, it had stopped on page 26, and I actually like to go back to that because there was a provision there that I wanted to hear a little more about. And specifically it was the employee will allow the employer to have access to telework location for purpose of assessing safety and security upon reasonable notice of the city. And I wanted to understand a little more about that. My husband has worked for both the County of San Mateo and the County of Santa Clara, and he's done remote work for both. For one of them, he had a position where he's in possession on his laptop, his work laptop, of confidential information that, so they wanted an inspection before he started work at home to make sure he had a location that was private and safe for the information. For the second position, he didn't have that thing. And so there has been such inspections. So what I'm wondering is our city employs an awful lot of different folks. So what kind of criteria would you use before recommending that we do something like this? Because, it's kind of a big deal for the city to come inspect your home. So I'd want to make sure being careful and thoughtful and respecting privacy interests, as well as looking after the safety and security interests that you're identifying here. So can you talk a little bit more about provision?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so we have this here. Sometimes we had cities will actually encourage employees to invite them in so that they can do like an ergonomic assessment of the setup from a long-term care standpoint. We also see this in here with the purpose of if there is to fall or trip, right? They're claiming want to put a workers' comp claim in. Then on the front end, you do an assessment in order to determine that from a risk mitigation standpoint, or on the back end, if there needs to be an investigation, also being able to come in. I would say the other item would be depending on the the sensitivity of the information that they'll be looking at, of wanting to look at in the that you've given, from just an overall security standpoint too.
Okay, thank you. I think that there's a distinction here between the safety of the worker, concern for safety of the worker versus concern for safety of the city's interests, separate from the work, such as an information and such. And this doesn't really distinguish that, and they're quite different. So, and it's interesting to me. Also, it's about the teleworkation. I was assuming it was a home, but it not be, I suppose. But were it to be a home, it surprises me that we would need to worry about trip and fall things, and there would be no concept of assumption of risk if you choose to work in your own home and get hurt on city time. So I'm just confused about that of a worry from under this vision.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think if we're concerned about, for example, if this is a utilities customer service rep that's taking phone calls, and we want to make sure that there's not 3 kids and 2 dogs screaming in the ground, and that's an essential part of the person's job, then I can kind of understand that. So maybe we have access to make sure that the office is suitable to the job. But to get a little bit clear, invade privacy, and it seems a little contradictory to that other thing you said, which is emphasize the output from the work, not process. So I agree there's some concern here.
Yeah, I just think if we're going to be inspecting people's homes, got to be very thoughtful and about how and when, and clear and objective about when that's appropriate.
I mean, in the IRS can audit you if you conduct a home office, and they'll do that to come in there and make sure it's not a man cave, and I think that's legit because they're investigating in a full audit if you're breaking law. But there's a little bit different in terms of workplace performance.
Yeah, and I'll say that the purpose of this is from a risk mitigation standpoint, for the city, as far as, again, assessing that safety and security, both for the employee, from a workers' comp standpoint, security standpoint, as well as for the company assets. And so it is as a caveat, should the city feel the need to do so, or there have been workers' comp claims in the past that have been filed that where employees, a specific case file, but employee was working during the day, working from home, went out of the garage to grab something, tripped, fell, and was filed a workers' comp claim. It was noted as, and so it's the where you choose to where you choose to evaluate your risk, mitigate your risk.
Well, so I have a question about that. So you filed a claim. Did you prevail on the claim?
I believe yes.
Pardon me?
I believe so, yes.
You did.
Mhm.
Okay, well, then we ought to look into why that would be the case and figure out if they're, lesson learned, but that surprised me.
Just to kind of continue the conversation on this, could, as my colleague recommended, can there be some sort of vision where people have to identify us, or just sort of assumption of risk waiver? So if they do trip and fall and dodge on city time, because it's property, we're absolved all, legal liability. I don't know, is that ability?
I'd love to hear from our city attorney on that.
Sorry, yeah, I was just saying, as I'm not can't provide that as from a counsel standpoint, from a liability standpoint. What I can say is from a best practice from the Society for Human Resources and other HR associations, I have not seen that in there.
Well, our city attorney is in the room, so.
Oh, perfect, great.
So I can speak to that. We're approving the agreement between the city and the employee to work from home, and that makes us responsible for a claim. But claim would be investigated, delayed to determine and ensure that it's a valid claim. So we wouldn't be able to seek a waiver in reference to.
Hold on, it makes sense. If why can't we amend the to have, a big waiver before they start? So want to do it, they have to accept the waiver. Why can't we do that?
What makes a valid claim is the question. Have to be during work hours, or is that it?
Yeah. I mean, a valid claim meaning that it's all the employees performing work activities. So
I just, the example we were given was in the garage, which was not in the work area. So this is odd to me.
Right. I think she was stated as an example. That's not like a city claim.
I know.
Okay. So it would have to be in the course of this, the duties of the job, right? And so when I say investigate, would be doing a thorough review of where the accident occurred, how did it occur, etc. In regards to the comment about ergonomics, we do virtual ergonomic evaluations, and there's no deterrence because someone is working from home. Right, we want to provide safe work practices and ensure that employees are implementing a workplace that's safe.
So just to add a couple comments, so in general, state law does not allow employers to require employees to waive those kinds of workplace programmatic rights that are provided by the workers' comp program, and nor would the city want to, because when you are in the workers' comp program, you are both the employer and the employee protected by the boundaries of that statutory scheme. The system is designed, frankly, to pay out more frequently, but quite a bit less in terms of amount. And if you're not in the workers' comp system, you're in the general civil litigation system, which is often less good outcome in a marginal case. So my office doesn't generally provide workers' comp. We don't do the workers' comp work for the city. That's handled straight through HR, but I'm going to follow up with HR and their outside counsel on this issue to look, see that we have our procedures up in a way that's correct and in these best interests.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. You're just saying that if we, in our work from home agreement, add a waiver saying that because it's your own home, you're all risk injury that happens in your home, you're saying that you get kicked out of work comp. Is that basically what you're saying?
I can give you full advice on the fly like this. I will consider your comments and work with HR. We can get back to you.
I think, I want to be very fair to our city workers, and if there's something that because of their work, they had an injury, but if it's because they have old carpet, like, is that on us?
I understand the question and the concern. It's a reasonable one. I cannot answer that today.
Okay,
We will
fine. I
need
just
to
want-
look into it and get back to you.
Okay, so just to clarify, it's to agree, is city responsible for the physical plan when a worker opts to take advantage of the city's work from home policy? Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Number 3. Oh, nothing? Number 3.
All right, thank you. So I recommend finding number 3 is that the city did have a standardized approach to determine position eligibility for remote or flexible work arrangements. So for a hybrid work schedule. The practice was for individual employees to request approval. And then that approval will be on a case-by-case basis. With this being specifically employee request based, there's potentially inconsistencies for which employees are being approved, and positions with similar essential duties and responsibilities being approved, not be approved for work based off of their supervisor's work preferences. So, so our recommendation is to develop standardized criteria to first evaluate at the position level across all the positions in the city of identifying which positions based off of their essential duties, based off of the set criteria, are eligible or potentially eligible for a high work schedule. And then noting those in your HRIS system, and then making approval for the individual employee. And that way, the individual employee requests. And so that way, across the city, the standardization for which positions are eligible for remote work, and standardizing that a little bit more, and making it less at the discretion of just depending on if, the department preferences for people coming into the door. To help the city, we work with the Human Resources Department to develop some preliminary criteria. These questions, the basis of questions were pulled from the federal government's ONET database. It's pulled from two different questions from that those surveys. There's standard questions that are commonly used within each human resources for to help pull in other essential job duties, classification, compensation, or just doing overall position evaluations. So we went through those, started with a slightly larger list, worked with resources to down to this list of 13 to start out with, and then went through and essentially made some rules criteria in conjunction with the Human Resources Department, worked with this so that they could use as a starting point and refine this as needed. Where I settled was looking at if an employee responds to a 5 for any of the questions, and that would make it so the position is not eligible for any sort of hybrid work because it indicates that their position responsibilities require them in person. Anyone who positions the score on average 1 across the board would be potentially eligible for full remote work. And anything that is falling within that yellow area or average score standpoint, they would be potentially eligible for hybrid work. We were recommending seeing this from a pilot program and then seeing that implementation, making modifications, getting feedback from some pilot departments, and then implementing this across the city. For management responses were a partial agreement with modification of, I believe, creating the tool and posting access to the tool on the city website for directors and managers to use to evaluate the positions, rather than allowing different users on an ad hoc basis, rather than implementing from a across the board for evaluating all positions. I'll pause there in case there are any additional questions.
If we're talking about eligibility, just to follow on the last discussion, if it comes back that we have liability for a worker's home over which we don't have control, then I would suggest that perhaps a criterion eligibility is that they have a safe home and they allow us to inspect at the beginning. I don't love that idea because it feels a little invasive, but I suggest to consider that as a component if that's where the liability goes. Because would we let someone work in an unsafe environment if we're assuming risk of their home and we can't control, like in here?
Two comments on your ability graph. Classifications of jobs, for example, the men and women hang up the telephone wires and electrical wires. It's like a no-brainer that 100% of their job is on the top of a what are those things called, bucket thing or something like that.
Bucket truck.
But I guess there's situations in which maybe someone's partial supervisor, so they do their paperwork home 1 day a week, things like that. In spite of what I just said, I'm glad that you're putting this to a grid, so there is analysis of it, not an assumption that definition, since they're up in trees all day, that they wouldn't be eligible. The second question, presume that the direct supervisor gets to evaluate if they believe that the answer is correct. So if this person answered that they're at a 2 once a year or more, and the boss knows that the person in the bucket truck every day, not just taking this as a self-evaluation, that the manager of the department or the supervisor gets to effectively tell that answer. Is that correct?
That is correct. The supervisor and the department director have the final approval or decision not to approve.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And in your example, the line people do not have hybrid work schedules.
Right. I mean, they would be a 5 in this case. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're to go on to opportunities, or is there anything you want to cover there, or are you done?
I'll let you go ahead, and from an opportunity standpoint, we do require management respond to that, and so, I'll just say from a note standpoint, if you'd like to take a look at it. It provides you some industry and market information as far as where remote work is going, within the past years, and, the effects and considerations in order to stay market competitive from a recruitment and retention standpoint.
Okay, great. Are there any other general comments that you guys want to make, questions? Otherwise, is staff looking for a motion on this? Okay, so then if you guys don't have any other questions, we could move forward with the motion. So, so I just want to ask, is the staff recommendation, does it mean that we have to partially agree, or what the auditor recommended? What does the staff motion look like right now?
So your option on audits is to accept the audit.
Okay. So, okay, so
And I'm sorry, just clarify, excuse me for interrupting, Chair Naka. It's to recommend that council accept the audit.
sure, okay. So by accepting the audit, basically, not saying whether it's auditor said or staff said, but just the report. Okay,
The audit is thorough, appropriate, and yes,
Okay.
and then
so maybe then we'll move forward with the staff recommendation with a few modifications. One of them is compare performance against pre-COVID performance. One is to investigate whether we can have some sort of waiver per Councilmember Vicky's suggestion, and then if that is the case, to also have that as part of the criteria they can work from home, is whether they have a safe home. I don't know if it captures what you said, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think we have to move that they accept, move it to recommend that council
Right.
accepts the audit and.
these are really outside referrals. I mean, auditors' work does not encompass ongoing management of really what is city manager's function in managing the city workforce. So these could be referrals or could be elements of council's performance evaluation of the city manager. Yeah, I mean, normally the city's HR procedures are not subject to direct council adoption, or this is city manager managing workforce, which is in our code, an administrative matter that's not really within council's purview. So, I think it's seen for the managers to think about what you recommend if this is a referral, come back with additional items. On the legal issue, I think I'll chat with HR about the workers' comp that they've gotten. I can send a communication, and hopefully with communication we can answer basic questions about the legal framework. So I think that's relatively straightforward. But in terms of how the city wants to set up its personnel procedures, that's really not matter. That's generally part of council's view. That's what the manager does in managing the workforce, and the council manager form of government really does need to be the manager's work. So you can give direction to your city manager and evaluate his performance. Okay.
I think you are correct. To the committee, we've heard your feedback and your comments, and I think for sure there are things that we will take into consideration in general management. Even in the hybrid policy, I think we do say that one of the requirements of it is that you have a suitable workspace. So I think we can reevaluate whether or not that language is, one, strong enough, or two, if there's something else that we can do. But we'll take that back as some to-dos in terms of our normal of business. Now, if there's a referral of action that you want analysis done, then you could always reflect data on something. That could be something that you refer to council that recommend they refer back to staff. But in terms of changing how our HR policies are.
Yeah, and I don't think we're trying to do that so much as, in addition to recommending that council accept the auditor's report, I would be curious on, I would like a request for a report back on these things, because I can't believe there isn't anything. That's why I'm glad to hear you say that there isn't something in our policy already, that there has to be some suitability. So I would request that the city manager report back to us on these items, and city attorney, and, and then for further consideration by the committee.
I think we can probably do that in the cover memo when this audit goes to council.
Correct. Yeah.
I think we can do some report back that will speak to the
Okay,
concerns.
then I guess we move that,
Can the clerk bring up the motion
I
page?
think
for-
that's it, isn't it
Oh,
the
is it?
second?
Oh, no, like this is,
She has a section.
oh, okay,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah. Okay, go ahead and tell.
Yeah, so if, exactly, recommend the city council accept the office, what you have here, and, that and request that the city manager's office, include in the staff report, in the corresponding staff report to council, what I want, current practices with respect to,
So I guess there's this measurement against pre performance, and then the one which is whether they could do a risk waiver or something to that effect, right? Because it sounds like the other one, which is it's a safe environment, is already covered under the criteria.
I'm sorry, can we see, perhaps you can restate those, your language so that can capture?
Okay, so I think so maybe you just have it in two parts, right? One is accept the audit, and then part two is something separate, which is to the city manager's office, which is part is compare remote work performance to COVID performance, and then the second one is whether a risk waiver can be added to the remote work agreement or something. I don't know. That's
I think we want to get a report on the current practice with respect to requirements of the employees' remote workplace. And then that we understand what we're doing right now, because
Okay.
it seems like there is something. And then I think separate was our request to understand the workers' comp thing,
okay. Does a clerk got that?
which I haven't articulated yet.
Right, so I think that your letter C is outside the scope of this item. The audit did not look at this issue, and I realize it's related, Chair Tanaka, but I think what you need to do is to recommend that council ask staff to work on that issue.
Okay, sure. That we should make a modification. Can do that. So it's recommend, because we're a recommending body, so this stuff has to be a recommendation council. So if you could craft it that way.
This to recommend city council seek a comparison from staff.
Oh, it already has recommended.
Yeah,
You're right.
it's in
You're
the-
right.
It's a preamble.
You're right.
So
You're
you
right.
say, see is, so we recommend city council seek a comparison of blah, blah from staff. Would that work?
I guess in all honesty, I would appreciate clarity on what the goal of this is. I'm not quite sure I understand what COVID performance evaluations, post-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
In relationship hybrid work.
Yeah, that's actually, let's make this a bit clearer. Let's
So-
compare pre-COVID performance to pre-COVID full on-site performance versus hybrid post-COVID performance. Right.
To, I guess, to what end, one, and two, our workforce prior to COVID and our workforce today is different. So if you're looking at individual employee evaluations, that's a extremely arduous task. We would need to go and find our 100, 200 employees working remotely and go look at find which ones we have continuity of in their roles.
Mhm.
So I'm not understanding what, if you could help me understand what your goal is at the end of this,
Sure.
maybe we can.
Yeah, going remote is actually very good for organizations. I myself, my own company, I went from fully on-site to fully remote, and it takes a lot. I mean, it's a lot of changes that have to happen, and I think that sometimes it's not. And this is actually a big thing for our organization, because what you might find actually is that there's some best practices that can be spread among the workers, and that perhaps there are more jobs that can be done remotely effectively. So anyways, it's something that's self-learning. I mean, it's something, this is like a nice science experiment, so to speak. You actually look at what happened and try to improve the organization from the learnings.
I think if I can maybe, I think it's trying to show that our city staff is still providing our residents excellent, if not better, more excellent service. Because I think you said that some of the degree of exceeding expectations may have even gone up with some of this remote work. We just want to know. So it's not person to person. I mean, yes, it's a rough average, but I think what the chair trying to get at is Are we serving the city? Is there any downturn in performance? Don't expect there will be. I'm hopeful we'll find good stuff. And
Sure.
say we can attract and retain employees. I think we want to know. Is that fair?
Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess I don't understand, that's not a quantitative to me analysis. That's a far more qualitative analysis of, are we seeing ourselves having an increased number of performance conflicts, I would say, whether that's, people that are not meeting expectations and are on performance improvement plans and the like. Our evaluation of whether remote work is impacting our services, I think, is demonstrated by our services to the community remaining uninterrupted. For example, you have the development center open 4 days a week. And so the services to the community are happening, actually 5 days, I'm sorry, on 4 days for weekend and appointments a 5th day. So that's kind of how we evaluate whether or not the services are being provided.
Okay, that's not what I was getting at, was sort of overall, if we're paying for have the libraries open next days, it's the quality of the services are provided. And Sandra, I think we're saying, I mean, there must be evaluations, whatever the criteria it is, meets expectations, exceeds expectations. There's some measure, I think I was hearing you, maybe not. And just wondering if that average, performance was static, better, worse with remote work. We just want to make sure we're doing the right thing by continuing to allow this, which I hope are.
To me, this is like sort of normal best practices evaluation that HR has to do anyway, whether they're remote or not. But to me, that's kind of off subject, because what we're talking right now is what are the audit that we should do going forward, because we've already decided that we're going to do remote. So all we're trying to do in this instance is to try to create the right form, criteria, who gets to be in there and so on. It doesn't really have anything to do. This doesn't have anything to do with the process. This doesn't have anything to do with evaluation. What's going to happen anyway by managers and by HR director. So I don't see this as a necessary coupling of our task at hand.
Thank you, Councilman Lowing. And I think that the alarm that you're slightly hearing from the staff here is a higher level procedural as you begin to work through these audits. What comes for you is an audit specifically scoped that has objectives. And the auditor is asking you to review that and recommend that it be accepted. And it includes management response. It is not the situation that the entire work area that is the subject of the audit is for this committee, general improvement. And this committee approaches its work in that way. We have a really serious institutional issue to address in terms of how we're going to get our work done when we bind our priorities, have all of our projects, and we're coming to deliver a completed piece of work, getting a series of broad, interesting, perhaps valuable new assignments that haven't been integrated with the other work that we're doing. So thank you, Councilmember Lowing. I think that's what we think doing. I think it's important that this committee and staff have a shared understanding of what we're doing when we're hearing audits in the committee.
In contrast, the item that's under discussion, I feel is quite appropriate for all of us to evaluate because of the liability issues and the inspections of the offices we're going to have to do.
So I think we hear you. I did look up the policy on that note, Councilmember Lowing, and it does say that one of the performance-based eligibility is that they maintain a suitable workspace. So there is language in there. Now, again, the degree of liability is still something that we can look at and respond back to. And I think we can provide basic statistics. I think I understand where you're coming at from a performance standpoint, but otherwise understood they are decoupled, but lightning information.
Yes. So I think that maintaining a suitable workplace really addresses and puts the onus on the employee. That's what I was looking for. I was calling it assumptive risk. Maybe they don't fully say we assume the risk, we agree to do the thing that essentially assumes risk. So that is helpful and answers my question on that one. I do agree our agenda item is to recommend accepting or not the accepting it. I do think that when significant issues come up in the course of reading audit, that it's incumbent upon us to ask council whether or not they want to look at it and wrap it into the course of their business, maybe at the expense of something else, because we have very limited bandwidth. I understand the alarm, but I think that's what at least I'm trying to do, is not to, change policy, anything that's audited, because I understand that's not the purpose of this. But I also think that there has to be some leeway if there's something significant.
So I think we should change this motion to be A and then B and drop C. And I'm not sure exactly the right nomenclature, but would need to accept the vote on recommendation to council to accept the audit. And secondly, maybe request that the second part of B.
Okay, well, here's what I'll do. Councilmember Vinker has a motion on the floor. I'll second it. And if Councilmember, you wanted to disagree or split the motion, can as well.
I would accept the friendly amendment to get rid of C, because that's what I was
Okay.
when I, based on what I've now learned out
Okay,
the correct. So I don't know whether you would as a
that's
senator.
fine.
Okay, thank you.
You want to take the vote?
Chinaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
motion carries.
Let's move on to the next item, which is Office of City Auditor Presentation of the Electronic Payment Process and Controls Audit Report. Does the auditor have a presentation like to go over?
Yes. Good evening. I'm simply a manager with Baker Tilly. I manage the electronic payment process and control view and would like to present the results of this review. What you see in the presentation on the screen is a summary of the introduction section of the report. That is packet page 39 to 41, where we describe the audit objectives, background information, scope, and methodology. The reason this review was performed is that in 2021, city became a victim of a scam called business email compromise, where scammer compromised the business email accounts through social engineering or computer intrusion techniques to conduct an unauthorized transfer of funds. This email compromise scheme, top incident reported in 2021, according to the FBI Internet Crime Report, and California had the most victims and losses in the US. So the objectives of the review were to evaluate adequacy and effectiveness of the internal control to ensure that all electronic payments are valid and properly processed in compliance with the city's policies and procedures, and to determine whether end user security awareness training is sufficient to prevent erroneous payments caused by phishing. For this audit, we evaluated the design of internal controls by reviewing the automated clearinghouse or ACH and wire disbursements processed by account payable and treasury teams, addition and modification of banking information, and user security training. Now we reviewed observation, recommendation, and management responses in the report. We have two findings. This finding is on packet page 45 and about electronic payment instructions. Because incident in 2021 was that scammer intercepted the email communication between the city and the vendor and gave the city a scammer's bank information to steal the payment. Management implemented internal control to verbally verify the bank information included in new ACH and wire payment requests and change requests. This is an important control noted in the best practice section of the report, but the city did not revise its policy to define and communicate the new control requirement. So based on our review of the new and modified vendor records, we noted that verbal verification was done only for banking information that was added or changed, not for other information such as tax number, payment method, and name. We also noted that supervisory review approvals of addition and modification of vendor records were not documented to show that a review control was performed. When the requirements for the contracted, such as verbal verification and supervisory review approval, are not clearly defined in the policy, the city cannot ensure that the internal controls are implemented properly and operate effectively. In the packet, page 50, we listed the recommendations and management responses. So the finding one, we recommend that the Administrative Service Department update policies and procedures to clearly define the development of the control activities so that the control can be implemented and executed as intended. Management agreed and issued an updated policy as in that audit. We also recommended to provide training on the required control activities to ensure proper implementation and execution. Also, recommended to implement a more proactive mechanism for employees to process payments to keep up with electronic payment fraud schemes, in addition to the annual user security training provided by the city. Management response was partially agreed. Management agreed that the importance of the continuous training. However, management believed that mechanisms are already in place. So this is the first finding. Do you have any comments? Okay.
People are still thinking, so why don't you keep on going, and we'll interrupt you if needed.
Okay. The second finding is packet page 46 and about ACH payments. Due to a small number of staff, there was a segregation of duties issue identified in the previous audit noted in the report.
Oh, Jimmy, I did have a question for you.
Yes.
How many times has this occurred in this history, and how many are we talking about?
The incident, so they noted that one incident, actually they became about a little less than $50,000, that incident. And then later on, now they were paying attention, so there are two of the incidents that they actually caught, and so they didn't not to be victim. But that's the only thing they noticed. So the way that it finds out they became a victim when the users contact the city and say, "Oh, we haven't received payment," while the city was thinking that they already paid. Then they found out that all went to somewhere else. Yeah. So if a vendor doesn't notify the city, then we would not know. City would not know.
Okay, so this happened one time in the city's 125 history, and there are two other attempts we throw basically.
Well,
Yes, that's what we know.
Chem, if I might add in here. So I don't know that we speak for the whole 125-year history, at least from our experience sitting. Yes, there's only been one incidence of this. In terms of attempts, there are far more than attempts. As a large organization, with number of employees and activities that are happening in a very public way, we do have these attempts and catch them in various ways. And that's why we have our analysis and policies and procedures to catch those. I can give you a number though.
Definitely, these are becoming the issue everywhere. I mentioned in the FBI report, there are a lot going on, and we may not know that. The controls are very important to catch those things. So definitely for the city, it's good to look at the control effectiveness and then make sure that any deficiencies are corrected. Okay.
I was just going to ask. I'm in the slow group over here. So on partially agree, maybe the staff could kind of tell me what's partial, like what difference is there, if any, in what we view we should do on this versus what's recommended? I'm reading both and I'm not getting this, but this is my area of expertise also. If you could help me.
Thank you. Christine Perra, Assistant Director of AD. Thanks for your question, Councilman Rumpicker. The partially agree on refers to the training, where we do agree that regular fraud training is appropriate, especially for staff, and a couple of staff people have to keep up with annual CPE requirements. As far as a formal mechanism, that's something that we do informally within our team to exchange knowledge. And we don't necessarily have, a KPI of how much fraud training you've done. Rather, we share information as we get it from periodicals, Government Finance Association and CSMFO. And if training opportunities present themselves, we do. In fact, I'll speak to this week. Our whole AP staff and our treasury manager attend a fraud recognition and prevention webinar yesterday, and we've set up for the Baker Tilly fraud site that's coming up next month. So while we have been proactive, we don't have a formal mechanism, quote unquote.
See, thank you. And so to our auditors, is that slight variance and acceptable risk in your view? In fact, an appropriate, I mean, that's.
Yes, the internal control we for something formal, because if it's informal, you get missed, and then that's the time that you miss something. So always look for formal implementation. So I heard Christine, I've seen some communication, they're sharing the information. So informally, I agree that they are trying to identify the scheme to try to run. I thought that it would be more effective if you have a formal mechanism so that they will not miss the good training they should be receiving. 1 year they have training, next year they don't have any training, so there will be an inconsistency.
Thank you, Tim. One thing I just want to also add to is every other year, our IT department requires to do mandatory cybersecurity training. So that's, I guess, one formal mechanism that we do in org.
Thank you both.
Question, Jamie, so with the changes that you guys recommend, would that have cut the 50K illegal transfer that happened?
Yes. So what happened is that those scammers intercepted and they changed the email address with a W and put the two. So it's hard to find, but with the training and awareness, staff would look at it closely and they would probably find out that the email address looked different and they might have. So definitely the awareness and detailed attention would help us identify more instances.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say, in terms of comment, I would just say, I mean, it was a problem, it was covered. They're recommending controls to fix it. I think it's very straightforward.
Okay, why don't you keep on going?
Okay. So the same finding is about ACH payment. I mentioned earlier that there was segregation due issue identified in the past audit reports. Our recent review in the ACP segregation duties. So it's important to have a mitigating controls when there's a segregation duty issue. So we looked at 20 ACH payments and identified the actual ACH bank account number for the payment was different from the ACH bank account number shown on the vendor invoice for one payment. The account closed and there was no financial loss, but the control to prevent an error like this did not operate effectively in this case. The quality and effectiveness of the independent views are especially crucial when segregation duties exist. We also identified that bank online portal is used to make ACH payments. The application control requiring dual authorization is currently in place. It means that one must initiate the transaction and somebody else must approve. So it takes two people to make a payment. Names of the individual who initiated and approved ACH badge are listed in the reports available online for a limited frame. But these reports were not saved offline. As a result, the audit trail sensing that dual authorization control is working effectively are not maintained. Although the bank was able to provide the information in a week, it is necessary for the city to maintain a complete audit trail to be able to trace by any irregularities and investigate them when they happen. In the package, page 51, we listed the recommendation and the management process. So the finding too, we recommend that administrative service department to work with the IT to identify the ways to improve the segregation of these and mitigate risks. Management partially agrees. Management agrees that they need to evaluate the segregation duties as part of the phase 2 of the ERP upgrade, but disagrees because they believe the mitigating controls are already in place. We also recommend that after the segregation duties resolved, the AST manager should strengthen mitigating controls over the AP payment process by ensuring that controls are designed to mitigate risks adequately and operating effectively. Management should update the policy and procedures. So management partially agrees. They agree that the policy and procedures should be updated, but disagrees because the controls come in place to mitigate risks adequately and very effectively. This is the conclusion of my presentation. Here's the recommendation to approve recommend the council accept the report.
While my colleagues are gathering their thoughts, was there a criminal investigation of the VK transfer? And if so, was the money eventually recovered? Does anyone know what happened?
Sure, I can and that, yes, referred the case to our police department and they did go and research and seek to recover the funds. Ultimately, funds were not recovered. Ultimately, the fund transaction ended up being traced to a larger scam. I think almost over $1 million scam that was happening, and therefore the case was referred to the FBI. I don't know if the FBI ended up taking it up, but ultimately at that point, we concluded our investigation.
My colleagues have any question, thoughts, comments?
None for me, no.
Either one of us want to make a motion here?
This time.
So this is the item on page 2, basically, recommend to council that they accept the city auditor presentation audit on electric payment process and controls audit report.
Second.
Okay, does any discussion, anyone want to speak to the motion, comments, debate?
I just want to thank the auditor and staff for helping us understand this area and for taking good care of our money. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to take a vote.
Councilmember Lowling,
Yes.
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, so we're gonna close item 2. Are you guys good? Or shall we take a break? What do you guys?
I've
Okay.
been at this since.
Okay, sure. Okay, so item 3, city council referral, discuss and recommend city protocols, international travel and other city related to the city council procedures and protocols.
You know, we take public on the last couple items.
Oh, yeah, good question. Is any public comment for this item 3 or any of the other items?
We have no members of the public online and I did not receive any request to speak for item number 2.
Okay, but you're here for item 3, I heard. Yes. Okay, so you have to give her a card.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have time.
Yeah. So, okay, does staff have a presentation on this? Okay.
Thank you, Chair, members of the City and Services Committee, Chantel Cotton Gates, Deputy City Manager. This item that's before you today is a couple parts to it. One piece of it is just letting the committee know as a reminder of all of the referrals that were to this committee related to your procedures protocols. We accomplished a lot. And there will be 7 items that were sent to the committee, and that is on packet page 54 that summarizes them. One in particular that we are highlighting for this evening, and if you answer all the questions and get done and want to go on any of the other, you're welcome to. I get a feeling you probably are going to feel comfortable with the one. Nonetheless, the item has been put on agenda in a way that would allow you to keep going, and we'll do that for any of the other ones that we're bringing to committee, which gives you maximum flexibility. So the item specifically on international travel, you know, the city has 8 sister cities and 1 sibling city. And it goes back 1962, I believe, is the longest relationship we've had with Oaxaca, Mexico. And the question that has come up over the years, which actually prompted the insertion of a travel section added to your procedure and protocols, was what are we doing related to this travel? And so for we have a piece of travel add to the procedures and protocols. We just cleaned it up because it was not entirely answering the questions that we needed. And these last remaining questions are the ones that the council referred to you. The one is, should council member international travel be approved for reimbursement at all? The backstory of that is if a council member does travel to one of our sister cities or sibling city, that's not international. So I'm trying to be inclusive of our sibling city, but the international aspect takes them out. Thank you. If a council member or the mayor does travel to one of our sister cities internationally, typically that is funded by that member of council or the mayor. But there has been questions from some. Is there a fairness question? Someone could not afford it on their own, or if they're traveling as an official's business thing, should it covered? So that's the first part. And then the second part is if we are allowing for that travel to have something covered by the city, well, how much should be covered and for whom? Is it just for the mayor? Is it one time? Is it for other council member travel as well? So that's kind of the breadth of the questions that are coming back from the city council to this committee. And I'll add one small piece, which is also why Neighbors Abroad is has representatives here this evening as well, which is the typically when we send a delegation to another one of our sister cities, the sister city may end up covering some piece of the expenses while we're there. That could be travel from the airport to the city. Most of the city that we're connected to are not your major metropolitan city where the airport is located. So there is travel that's involved. Usually they will arrange for transportation for our delegation to get from the airport to actual city, and potentially their expenses while there, food. Some have offered hotel accommodations. It completely varies. Most recently, we have received an inquiry from our French sister city as well as German sister city of, well, when we send a delegation to Palo Alto, what will the city of Palo Alto cover for their delegations while here? Historically, we have covered through the funding we give to Neighbors Abroad kind of reception and maybe one meal. Other communities abroad typically will have covered more meals for our delegation were there. So I know why the question is coming up now, but the question has come up of, well, is there a level of reciprocity that we should be sharing with our sister cities of what they can expect when they send a delegation here? Are we covering any of their expenses? If we are covering some of their expenses, what are we covering for whom in the delegation? So that gives you the breadth of the dialogue happening. It does all come back to money at the end of the day, but specifically a policy around what the funding should be. So that is the item that's before you. And again, I know there are some public speakers that happen to be Neighbors Abroad that have some information they would like to as well.
Is this question only about Neighbors Abroad or any kind of international travel?
That's exactly
Amy.
what I was going to ask, because when we think of COP and some of the climate stuff and people go to world summits on climate.
It could be
that's-
any.
Yeah, I think it should be.
That's a very good question. I phrased it in terms of the sister cities because that comes up often, but it's the question of Council for Travel International is covering any international.
Okay.
Great question.
Do you or I don't know if it's relevant to have the current policy manual text for context, or just where it fits in, what kind of language we're
I do. And
ultimately going to need to refer back to council.
I do, and I can get that with the clerk so she can share it. Right now, it can fit anywhere in that section of the protocols document, but I'll have to pull it up.
Okay, that might just help us articulate later. Thank you.
So you spent a lot of time talking about international travel, but there's 1 through 7 on this page here. Is it for us to go through 1 through 7 tonight, or you want to focus just purely on international travel?
Good question. So we are, for all of the referrals that came from council, your procedures and protocols book, we're going to highlight one of them as your primary topic today. That's international travel.
Okay.
And then if you have an appetite, we'll go as far as you want on the list.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, great. And so if you do this, if clerk could capture some things that was said, staff of things that they want our opinion on, that'd be great. That we have some sort of outline. And in the meantime, if the public, you guys have a card already, right? If you can call them and run through the cards, awesome.
Our first speaker is Edward Vike, and you have a presentation, so I'll be screen sharing. One moment.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, everybody. As Ms. Yu said, I'm Ed Fake, and I am president-elect of Neighbors Abroad. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chair Tanaka. Thank you, committee, for listening to us tonight. We have a very brief presentation on Neighbors Abroad, who we are, and then we'll follow it up with a proposal for council, for the committee. Let's start with the Neighbors Abroad mission. If you could pull up the slide. That's the second slide. And I will just read that. Neighbors Abroad fosters Palo Alto's domestic and international engagement through friendship, education, commerce, and sustainability. Next slide, please. So we are a small, very spirited nonprofit consisting of 15 active board members, 1 part-time staff administrator, and 1 part-time bookkeeper. We correspond with city governments, we host delegations, and we develop engaging programs for 8 international sister cities and 1 domestic sibling city. We love serving as citizen diplomats when we go abroad. We also take special pride showing off Palo Alto when visiting delegations come here. Next slide, please. So how do we benefit Palo Alto? Actually, in a number of ways. A primary benefit that Neighbors Abroad provides is economic development. We bring business to Palo Alto. We provide links between local and international businesses through our partners like the Nord Innovation House and the German Accelerator. Both are right around the corner. You could walk there from here. In the past year alone, we have hosted 4 delegations. Each has brought increased revenue and foot traffic to Palo Alto businesses. And without fail, these visitors post favorably on social media, and they return home with raves about Palo Alto, encouraging future tourism. Next slide, please. Another benefit where we really shine is student exchange. It's one of our core initiatives. We open students' eyes to the world. We provide Palo Alto's youth with the opportunity to learn new languages and appreciate cultural differences by hosting long-time exchanges with Japan, Mexico, and France. We're especially proud to have co-sponsored a student essay contest last year in honor of a World War II hero, Master Overdine, who saved the lives of hundreds of Jews in our sister city of Enschede. This summer, these contest winners from Palo Alto and Huntington, Indiana, will be visiting Enschede in a program co-facilitated by Neighbors Abroad. Next slide, please. We are very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and we participate in local events that celebrate the countries of our sister cities, including last summer's International Festival. We're especially aware some of the groups we support are not well represented in civic life. And so what we do is we provide them voice in the community. And next slide, please. Finally, Neighbors Abroad engages in sustainability initiatives that create a better environment for Palo Alto and the world. Examples include our carbon offset program in Oaxaca and last month's climate summit right here at City Hall, which allows visitors from the Nordic region to trade best practices.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your 3 minutes is up.
Oh, last sentence.
What's it? Finish. If the
I
chair
realized
will
my
allow.
last sentence.
If the chair will allow, then.
Thank you so much. It allowed visitors from the North region to trade best practices with local experts to combat climate change. So that's my introduction. Yes, Jeanette.
Right.
Our
Thank you.
speaker is Jeanette Kessler. Oh, Jen.
Yeah, Jeanette Kiesling. Hi, thank you very much for your time this evening, council member and Chairman Tanaka. So thank you, Ed, for giving us this overview of what Neighbors Abroad bring to the table, our programs and our role in the city relationships. We are in a unique situation here in Palo Alto because whereas other city and sibling cities are state-led and funded, in Palo Alto, it's mainly Neighbors Abroad, which administers these relationships with sister and sibling cities. So the benefit, of course, of all of this is that it eliminates some staffing and program-related expenses. If you will, we volunteers are doing a lot of the work of these sister city and sibling relationships. We receive some funding for our efforts through the annual contract for administrative services between the city and Neighbors Abroad. However, the city requires us to spend 70%, so of the $30,000, 70%, $21,000 of these on program administration. This leaves very little for very small sum for delegation visits. The majority of our donations so we also do some fundraising, are pledged to our humanitarian efforts. For example, our Ukrainian children's, which brought in over $100,000, which we gave to Ukraine. And despite our volunteer efforts to reduce expenses, the cost of entertaining our delegations is a very significant amount for a small nonprofit. So actually, I have all of this on the side. I should have told you that to continue on. And we're kind of through this, so we can go to the next one, right? So a request to you tonight is to agree on a modest annual stipend of up to $20,000, which would be allocated toward reasonable meal, entertainment, and other expenses for visiting sister and sibling city delegations. And that is important on a reimbursed basis. So we're not asking for money up front. We're asking you to reimburse us if and only if have these expenses. For clarity, this allowance should be in addition to the general content and administrative services between the city and neighbors abroad. And as Chantal pointed out, occasionally, and this is the second question we would like to get your guidance on, occasionally, the delegates from Palo Alto have accepted complimentary lodging, for example, sister cities. I'm in my last sentence. If I could finish, would that be okay? So which has created some expectations of reciprocity, and kindly request your guidance on whether this lodging would be further accepted.
Great, thank you for your comment. Can the clerk please bring up the document with the thing from staff of the questions that we want to answer? And so what I propose to my colleagues is that we have kind of longest list of questions of what we want to support or not. Maybe what we could do is I do exact count, but it seems like there's like 6 or 7 questions you asked. And so maybe what we could do first, just as a process of elimination, is for the ones that you guys want to say yes to or want to have discussion on, we will talk about those and we assume the answer is no. Okay, so can you put a list of questions? Just a chat, yeah. No, not yet. I'm gonna cover that. Yeah. Questions. Okay, can you put the 5 questions? And so as you guys see the questions, if there's any one of those 5 questions, any more, just we'll say something and then we'll discuss those. And ones that none of us want to talk about, the answer is basically no.
Well, can I ask a real question?
Sure.
While you're writing up your question, the 30,000 you get is through administrative services. So Kylie, they're asking for essentially another 20,000 or different kind of purpose. Wouldn't that be a different committee than us, i.e. finance and then budget?
Yeah.
Because that would just be sort of an incremental request above the 3, it seems to me.
That's correct. So that would be through the budget process. You will be taking up the proposed budget with the finance committee on May 5th, at the study session at the city council on May 1st.
Okay, thanks.
And also just to clarify, I know she said for administrative, it's not through the administrative services department. The city manager's office manages the contract for Neighbors Abroad, but it is paying for admin support for Neighbors Abroad.
Okay, I see there are 4. Were there other questions that you also a few other questions, I think. What's mean?
They're all sort of if type of
Oh,
questions.
can you just so that she could write it? You could see all of them.
I think this is a basis enough for your conversation.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
if you say yes to one of the questions, then
Okay.
add some specificity essentially.
So for my colleagues, and so I guess look at lines 5, 6, and 8. And if any one of them you guys want to chat about, say so, and we'll chat it. And if there's none of them that we want to chat about, basically the answer is no. So I'll save the time in terms of eliminating some of these topics. So
5 seems like we needed about that.
okay, 5, okay.
I mean, it seems, so this is Councilmember National Travel be approved reimbursement.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
so we'll talk about, so maybe just maybe highlight yellow, so we'll talk about 5 and then go ahead.
So my question is, I think as a threshold matter, is there a reason to separate out 6? Is there some, I mean, like.
Okay, well, I tell you, let's have 5, let's highlight 6, okay? Okay, you guys good then with this?
I'd like to go back, yeah. From both.
5 and 6, okay?
And
And then-
Councilmember Vinker, actually on number 8, the one I think asking about to the
It
city.
wasn't a-
Oh, I'm sorry, you were asked about 5 and the combination of sister city
I mean,
versus.
arguably, if we were to say yes to 5, why would we treat 6 differently? That's what I was trying to say.
Okay,
Fair.
okay. So we're talking about 5 and 6. And it sounds like 8, no one has to talk about it. So we're not talking about 8. And there's another one, 10. Oh, sorry, do you want to talk about
No,
8?
I just wanted to note that on 8, while I very much appreciate the inclusivity of cities throughout here, that I think the referral from Cal was for internationals. I like the way you have it in 8, and I think we have them at tonight's discussion to the international sister cities, and also then we can have any questions of my recall as well.
Okay. So we're not gonna talk about number 8. Okay. Number 10. Anyone want to talk about 10? Or should we just focus on 5 and 6?
Is that in the scope of what was referred to?
I don't
Are we
know.
allowed to do that?
Maybe
Because we were supposed to be talking about.
maybe it's not.
international. I just don't know. I mean, but I don't want us to address
Yeah,
some.
it may
point.
not be
I'm just
agenda.
not sure it's.
Yeah,
agendized
okay,
for tonight.
okay.
Seems like that could also be a request to the finance committee.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna recommend, since
Okay.
that links to maybe the neighbor broad request as well. Maybe that's something can be sent to the budget process.
Okay, so we're gonna focus on tonight on 5, 6, and maybe 7, because 7 is a subset 6, right? Okay, good. So we have our work cut off for us. Okay, so let's start with 5. And so for 5, who wants us to start first in terms of why we should do it? This John.
So I think there's obviously differences in why a council member would need to take an international trip. So it has to be evaluated and the approval process to take in the company. But I certainly see situations which for Councilor Vinker just mentioned, for example, a climate summit that's in Paris. And if that's a valid thing for us involved in, then it's effectively a business expense and should be covered, shouldn't be at our salaries, 85% of our annual salary to take a business trip on behalf of the city. So in terms of policy wise, I think it's yes. Which ones are valid, which ones aren't, would have to be evaluated in more detail. Something as simple as there's a proposal that, is appointed by the mayor or gets approval by the mayor to represent the city, and that's all it takes, maybe. That would be my starting point on this one.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're going to focus first 5, and then we'll talk about 6. And so if I was to summarize colleagues, reason why pro is because it's a legitimate business expense for that to go. So I think is that a summary?
Yes, and it shouldn't be borne by that council member.
Okay. Do you have any? And you can talk about cons too. One. Because we're talking about 5. We talk about the pros and cons. So you could want to talk about any cons. You could also do that.
Well, the cons is it costs city money.
Okay. So put that down for the. Okay. So
which means we have to be
investment, Ed.
I know, which means we have to be trained in how many trips are taken. Like
okay.
a typical company kind of policy.
Okay. Sure. Go ahead.
I don't see any reason that would exclude international travel from something reimbursable. I think have to have criteria for both domestic and international travel as to it should be benefit to the city, should be an appropriate business. I think the criteria here are key, but I don't think to draw a line at our borders is the right thing to do.
Okay, so okay, I'll give my thoughts. So first of all, I think the pros and cons you guys are correct. I also like the idea of the criteria. So is it, is boondoggle conference, is that a business expense, or it's something where it's essential that the city actually have representation there, or someone lists something? So I think the criteria actually matters a lot. But international travel is pretty expensive, and Zoom is pretty good these days. So I guess maybe Council, I don't know if you can maybe can you sketch out potential criteria that might be appropriate for us to consider?
Again, I'd like to know is we're currently using for domestic travel, because it seems to me it should basically be the same. I mean, the point is it costs more to go to, Boston than it does to Stockton. So would always want to balance the cost reward ratio. And I just think it's no different international. So I would look to say, what do we do now for domestic, if anything? But I think it should be similar.
Okay. Can you create, just to create some space for us on sheet, can you create some extra lines of the extra rows below 5 of base it on the domestic criteria? Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, I think we at least want to know what that is. We can say, is it all transferable? Would we want to tweak for any particular reason? It doesn't strike me what would be, but I'd just like to look at it to the extent we have it.
To that, Chair and Member Vinker, you do not have a policy on districts. So while I think it is a great idea to link them, it would also need to create that.
Okay.
So that's the real question is when it's appropriate to, without over legislating it, what would we say is appropriate? I guess if the question is not before us as to exactly, or just setting aside for the moment exactly those criteria are. And when I look at question 5, should it approve for reimbursement? My question is, why shouldn't it? Why should it be different? And I don't think it should be. So I think it should be approved. I'd like to see us have some basic criteria, but as in the discretion of whom? The mayor, the Whose discretion is it to expend money for domestic travel?
It's just budgeted.
Yeah, correct. And usually council members work with the city clerk's office on just in conferences or any travel that they wish to organize. And so that's typically done by council members with city clerk's office.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out the authority saying yes or no, because I mean, a budgeted pot, but we don't budget by conference, do we?
No, you don't budget by
Right, so-
conference. So typically what will happen is the members will articulate to the city clerk's office desire to travel. The city clerk's office will look at whether or not there's enough budget for travel within the existing appropriations. If not, the city clerk will typically alerts, and we will identify how much is remaining council contingent account, and then we'll make the mayor and vice mayor aware of that funding.
So you're telling me I should hurry up and get my request in before council member Lang, is that?
I put
Thank you.
mine in this afternoon.
Oh, no, I'm too late.
So typically, and I think you all know, we've used council contingent funds to support council member whole, and that email does go out to all councilors, and through your new council policies and procedures, you have some additional guidance on the use of contingent funds.
I think the simplest to do it, at least as a first take, is kind of said before, is to come up with, the mayor can approve it, but I would think we would come up with a recommendation to the finance committee or the council about how much would that be in a given year. So that we can come up with, that's the deal, and the mayor knows how much she or he is spending, and then we go from there.
Okay, actually, just to keep this order, can the clerk, because there's no domestic travel, so can the clerk just add a couple extra lines? So one is come up with criteria, because there is no criteria. And the second idea that the council member come up with is have it budgeted. Is that what you're saying? Have some sort of, yeah.
Yes,
So
exactly.
can another line, so basically, there should be a approved budget for the travel.
Yeah, but yes, and piling on what Kylie said, but for example, when the new council members went to the League of Cities meeting, that didn't have to through the mayor, that went to the city manager because there was already budgets, things like that. And it was completely city basically.
Yeah, I just wanted to know for the clerks and we as council members were to go to conferences or whatnot travel, we typically just look at the budget to see if it fits. But we also don't necessarily track how often the council member travel and how much. So there's no limit to each council member at this point.
So to help the guide conversation, I think real staff is looking for is and the referral to this body is developing that policy. What is the policy that you as a committee recommend the council institute as the criteria or objectives that travel should be evaluated, or travel requests as council members should be evaluated upon. The council, as part of your P review, already asked staff to include in the budget a restoration of the council's travel budget in alignment with pre-COVID levels. So I do know, I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say we did include, I think the difference was like $30,000. So in this FY24 budget, I do think we fixed that. It's brought forward as will be brought forward as a recommendation based on council's direction already. So really tonight, what we're seeking is feedback or ultimately your recommendation to the council. What is that criteria? So if a request is in, if it's not first come first serve or it's a dollar value thing, what are those things? Does it need to be in alignment with an association that the city is part of? Does it to be in alignment with one of the 4 council priorities, or could it be something else? Does it need to be, what are the criteria in which you would want your travel request to be evaluated against?
And there's also the question, which I guess maybe you want to get to later in terms of the amount, right? So should we hold on that for now?
Well, I think what we should do is we should be very generous here, list all the ideas that people have, and then we could talk about it, whether we actually want to put it or not. But you could go ahead and put it down so that we consider it.
Well, I guess I was wondering just a benchmark, what the one was, because arguably it would be, to your point, a little larger. We're starting to now cover additional travel. I don't know that we want to do that at the expense, so to speak, of domestic travel. In other words, I don't know that we necessarily want to curtail that. But obviously don't want to be jet setting around the world on the taxpayer dime for no particular reason. So I guess, the basic criteria is that it would advance the city's interests, be they economic or other that we could think about.
Okay, can you list that against the city's
interests, e.g. economic, or policy objectives, and I'm thinking of COP in particular. So, and then I say, e.g., council priorities. So this year we have the 4. So if it's going to advance for both of those, and then we would have to, I wonder though, is whether we set up, I don't want to encumber it too much, but I wonder what we should have some sense of, we don't want to, if we take the mayor and vice mayor of it for a moment, because there's special duties, ceremonial things that come along with that. For the other 5, I don't think we want just one person running around and the rest of us can't. So it should be some sense of rotation, distribution among the remaining council members. I don't exactly know how to articulate that. And we might even over the course of 2 years, we're all, the same group, same 7 is here for 2 years, and it might be timing wise and planning wise. It's not just year by year, but over the course of 2 years, that the budget would be equitably distributed amongst council members.
Can you list the rotation 2 years on there? Also, feel free to jump in as you have idea.
I will, but you're working on a good list. I don't want to slow down our momentum there. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, right? The one thing I was going to put in there so that there's some rails on this, I'm not quite sure I'm going to design this on the fly, but it might be something like, where attending by Zoom, means you can't, what we need out of it. It's sort of like, of course, we're not just looking to put people on planes. If that's really, functional interaction for 5 days, you can sit on a Zoom screen, some raise to that extent. So we know that there's some constraint there.
Example that and be certain conferences where you're asked to present, and it raises the city's profile for a variety of reasons. And sometimes you can present on Zoom, but oftentimes you need be there to accept this engagement.
So I think the last one is Zoom doesn't cut it. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe change to Zoom doesn't cut it. Okay. Well, what was the last one you were thinking about?
On the other hand, there's another thing that came up that's interesting here is that, if we're going to accept an award in Paris, it's necessary. Somebody has to fly her for 10 minutes to get award. So that's another kind of nuance that we should be noting.
Right. But if there were attendant meetings that promote, other objectives or economic benefit to the city that are there because you're getting an award, then it might be. It's just good on Zoom. That's not. So I think it's very circumstance specific. So I think if Zoom doesn't get.
Yeah. So can you change in to Zoom not effective? Zoom not effective. Okay. Sorry.
One other one that we have toyed around with, even just in the Sister City realm, is the frequency by which visits are useful. So, for example, if we do go to one of the conferences or a Sister City in year 2020, we shouldn't need to go back again for at least a few years. So that's something that kind of helps. And if we go back, it needs to be obviously merited, but just like a recommendation of maybe 5 years, something in between, just as a possibility for something to consider. That's more relevant in Sister City realm, but just throwing that out.
Yeah, something like consecutive annual visit not recommended.
So maybe spacing between visits or something like that. A little bit more precise.
Visit to any one city will be reasonably spaced.
Okay, yeah.
Figure out what reasonable means, but clearly it's not every quarter.
Is it city or conference, Vicky?
City or conference.
Yeah, because it could be moving around from.
Yeah, I think context of sister cities, I always think, that we wouldn't want to just too much one, but on the other hand, I think it also applies to conferences, maybe. Some of them are annual, so.
And they move around from city to city.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I think I withdraw or conference. I think it's all just, I think that's baked into the city's interest and policy/council objectives.
Okay. Any other ideas, suggestions? Otherwise, I'm going to start adding stuff. So, you guys, I want to make sure you guys have exhausted your ideas here.
It's hard to try to get in, again, in business, it's hard to get in the value of the meeting, the kind of return on investment. You can't do that calculation. Well, it's okay if it's 1,500, but not 3,000. Just there's no way at that, but we hope that the decision maker is taken into account.
Perhaps you'd say something like consideration of, value of the trip with versus the cost to be incurred.
Cost value relationship.
Yeah, cost value. And if you're using qualifying like consideration of, then it's not going to dictate, but it would be something that you could consider.
You should end that one. Consideration of cost value relationship.
I think one that we should add, I think something that, I forgot who mentioned, I think actually you mentioned it, Councilmember, was, or I forgot who mentioned about the total, like there's a total, oh, actually, Councilmember, I think mentioned an overall budget, there's a budget amount. How much that we have to probably debate, but then I think Councilmember, you mentioned, right, was.
I think we both did actually. It's sort of, we need to put a number in there.
Yeah, okay. So,
We should recommend it.
yeah, so that's maybe number 13 is a total amount. Okay, anything else that's missing from this list?
The answer is probably yes, missing from this list, but
Okay, okay. So, okay, so let's, so now that we have a list here, I think what we should do is debate it, right? To see, which one makes, which one doesn't, and maybe other ideas that come out of this. And so, so I think actually 6, we must get rid of because we've, in our discussion, kind of come up 7 through 13, which essentially, okay, so let's just delete 6 because we have now a straw man criteria. Okay, so let's talk about the first one. Pre-approved budget for travel. Okay, does anyone want to debate in terms of pros or cons?
And you're saying a collective budget, this, right? Not
No, the
per-
budget is 12.
So this is like per.
This is what's been allowing was saying earlier, which is there should be sort of not a blank check, but some cap on the.
I think I was talking about the total.
Oh, okay.
I think I was about what is now 12.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I
sorry,
have-
sorry, I misunderstood.
I have no problem with this amendment for 6.
Okay, okay. So
If someone's going to approve this, they need to know what they're.
yeah, that's what you meant. So
And that align with staff policy. So anytime wants to request travel, there is a pre-travel process where you're requesting from your supervisor pre-approval, estimated cost, the value of that trip. So I think perhaps that's what this could translate to. The question would be who'd be reviewing that, approving that.
No, I like that because I think. I think that perhaps when we made that trip to Sacramento, we used form and I saw all that stuff and I just thought it applied to us too. So, but there'd certainly be some good guidance there. But it's. But sometimes guidance is around, you don't fly first class, you know, that kind of thing, as opposed to a number, because if you're going to, you know, Canada versus Taipei, it's going to be very
Sure.
different.
So, and you know, I think what we're talking about criteria of how you want to govern choosing when and not to travel and your process for it. If the council already had agreed to what I think you've seen when you did the Sacramento travel, which is our administrative policy travel, which had all of those guidelines, like don't fly first class, choose the most economical way to get there, you know, to get the hotel, you know, conference rate, government rate kinds of things. So those kind of administrative policies, for lack of a better term, we did recommend that council just follow what we follow staff for. I think maybe a limited example.
And you adopt that in what we did on
Yeah.
Monday.
We already did that. So that's
We don't need to do that.
I think what this is doing is just saying that part of your evaluation council members for travel be that you do go through approval process, a pre-travel a request process. That's what line 6 I would interpret say. And I think the outstanding question, if that is something you choose to adopt as part of criteria, it would be the approver of that.
okay, does anyone want to speak on this 6 here?
Well, I think if I understood you right, we're not pre-approving the budget. That is an inherent council, sorry, to the guidelines we approved tonight, we're pre-approving the act of travel, like the decision that this is with it.
Correct. So I think the pre-travel authorization requests clarify that.
Yeah, to delete the budget in that line 6. Because we're the total budget we're going to deal with in line 12.
And as additional context on the pre-approval, there was one line that links to this that is your procedures and protocols handbook, an updated one that says member travel will be approved by the mayor. And so if there's a recommendation for someone else to do it, that would just to be in your recommendation with your criteria.
Okay, any other discussion on this? Thoughts? Okay, so okay, you know, so we could vote all these one by one, or we could just keep going and then assume that if there's no real debate on it, that we're okay. That sounds.
One other option could be, we could do this as sort of a, just amongst ourselves, a first reading. And think about it some more until the next meeting, then say, hey, I had 1 or 2 more ideas.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Are you?
I'm okay with it. I think there's some state wording issue in line 8, because I think it's 2 years between each council member. I think it's that there will be a rotation amongst council members so that travel is distributed equally over the course of years,
Yeah.
right? So you're just gonna go at the end. Yeah, so that's fine. Just move the of to.
Yeah, it was kind of confusing with number 10 there. Which is stands its own.
Council members.
Let's just walk through this list and then have your it's ready for the items as we go. So 7, any thoughts, questions about 7?
I would suggest we add economic in there, just say advanced cities interest, even like e.g. economic. Just I think that's a key one, and it hopefully could pay us back. I think it's a key example to cite.
Yeah, actually, I almost feel like it should be IE, right, instead of EG, right?
I think there's certain maybe indirect economic benefits, but cultural benefit and things sometimes are in the city's good interest as well. So I'd hate to limit it exclusively to provable economic interest, even though I think that's typically what it'd be.
From a sister cities perspective, if I can add a little context, there are a few buckets that we have viewed sister city relationships on. Cultural is one of them. So cultural, economic, and that's the third. Environmental. So those have and culture includes art.
So, clerk, we might have to split one because we may have agreement. So maybe just add a line and then we'll talk about economic. Okay. Okay. Any else on 7? Okay, let's go to okay, let's debate about the economic. So Alto is a domestic city, right? Obviously, and not a very big city geographically. And how good Zoom is these days. I think the bar has to be really high for us to travel, even domestically. And so I think if economic, right? If we could say there's an economic benefit, that covers the cost of the trip, then it's easy to justify. And I think you guys know the economic environment we're in right now. Meta ahead with the 4th round of layoffs. We heard First Group banks teetering. So I just feel that we need to be very sensitive to the public's money. But anyway, so I think for the clerk, maybe straight out, this is not because I'm not sure my colleagues necessarily agree with me on this. So, but you guys are welcome to me on it.
Yeah, I would take a different position because I think, for example, the COP climate summit is a good example. That you could make an argument that it's in our economic interest because the green economy is strong. We're known for it. I think whereas we're a small city, we are internationally known. We probably have the most outsized reputation of almost any city on the planet, given our population and how much people know us. And thus we're leaders, and we're particular leaders in the climate realm. And I think if we go there, first of all, that's our values. Residents appreciate it. It's a council priority, but it can pay us back economically. For one, just because take care of our earth and our climate reduces expenses of dealing with climate change. But it also can more directly attract green business, green tech. So I can't say that we go to that conference and we immediately get business, but I think it's in the best interest for a variety of reasons.
Okay, I don't have to capture some of the pros and cons talked about, but I think we should actually split out the economic one because I think we're going to have a different opinion on that one. Just the IE economic, just put down to 8. And put the pros and cons. I don't know if I want to weigh in on at all.
The both, I know I'd like to get return investment for travel anyway, domestic included. And sometimes you don't know if that's coming this week or next decade. So it's a little bit subjective to call. I'd be less excited about someone who said, let's go to AC and explore their history and dance with them and stuff like that. That sounds like an interesting vacation. So that's where the judge gonna have to come in terms of who gets to approve or not. So if it was sort of purely experiencing that city and coming home and making a report to council and the citizens, I wouldn't be excited about that. Just restricted the word economic is also a little bit too restrictive. So I'm kind of in the middle there.
Actually, I think the economic is by nature of what we're talking about here is not quantifiable. It seems like it's going to be able to have some sort of feedback, but we're not going to give the exact dollars. I think that's too hard. Even for companies, it's too hard to do. So I don't think I think it's more that we could point to the stakeholders of the city that this could have some payback later on. maybe a little bit squishy. At least we could justify versus saying, oh yeah, we did this big boondoggle and went to Nice and went to the beach type thing. So so that's what I'm about in terms of economic, not a hard figure, because I think that's not possible.
Yeah, but you could go to, say, what city to pick? Vancouver. That's kind of neat because it's but if you could go to North American Conference on full housing, you could end up with a lot of people saying, I've got ways to build it cheaper. I'm an investor in that. I
Yeah,
want to
but
talk
that's
to you.
economic. That's economic.
That's what I'm saying.
You could
That's what I'm
justify that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're on the same page. I'm not talking about a super hard. We got 42 economic benefit. I think that's possible.
Yeah, I think problem is that when you put the word in there, you end up doing exactly what we're doing, thinking about what is economic and what is
Yeah,
not.
that's
And
fair.
I think that if you don't have some very reason to do city travel, you are going to pay a heck of a price publicly. It's going to be transparent. You're going to have Dave Price right at us. I mean, I just think that, we've seen it in other cities, right? The boondoggle language is there. And so I think there's a huge disincentive to abuse this. I think to debate, it's most typically going to be economic, but things like market trips, is there immediate economic benefit? Maybe, maybe not. I just would rather avoid debating it. I also think there is a lot of value in raising this profile. And I think there's value in cultural relationships that just help our economy run more smoothly. And so it's all related, and I'd rather not end up debating what is expressly economic.
Okay. So one item that I have, I'm not sure it's going to solve it, which is line 14, which is we publish our trips on our website so the public could see. They price, they know, like you say what we're going to do it for. So members of the public could see like where we're going and how we're spending. And if the things is the boondoggle, we will prep, right? Sorry, you want to say something? Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, great. We'll talk about 14 later, but that's just an idea. Okay, anything else on 7 or 8? Otherwise we'll move 9.
On 8, which is rotation one.
No, that's 9. That's 9.
Oh, that's 9. Never mind.
Okay, yeah. So actually, I think that pro for the economic is we justify the spend. I think that's the pro. The con is restrictive, and we spend too much debating with than it's worth. Right? So I think that's the con. Okay, 9. Okay, who wants about 9?
I just want to change the word equally to equitably.
Okay, did you want 9?
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't think it should be strict or a rotation. If, for example, it turns out 2 years from now, Vicky's our primary climate guru, I wouldn't want to say somebody who is interested in climate particularly. I can't imagine who would be, but because it's their turn, they should go. So, I don't think we need to be too strict about it. And I'm not sure the line is too strict right now. I'm just saying.
I think that actually think of them as the same concepts. And so I think we just said it's distributed equitably among council members. That implies rotation of some sort on a makes sense basis. So I would argue that we should say distributed equitably among council members.
I'm good. Want to modify that to say that? Do they have rotation in there? You're just okay. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, let's close on 9. Let's have a 10. Okay. You want to talk about that?
That sentence is pretty effective, Greg.
Okay.
Okay. Member Tanaka, you might want to change Zoom to virtual, since it may not be.
We would change it.
Okay. Yeah. Right now we're not trying to motion going. We're just trying to rough ideas to. Okay. So 11. Anyone want to talk about 11? Okay. 12. Anyone want to talk about 12? Okay. 13. So we got to talk about 13. So what is okay? How much do we spend right now on domestic?
I'll look to Mehana if she knows. I will say, knowing that your per budget was about less than 30,000 because we did inflate it a little for inflation. My guess is you're spending more than that a year. Obviously, that's very historic because I know they're not spending that over the 3 years since one's been going anywhere.
Okay, so so I think the question here is: should we just do domestic budget and split it among domestic and international, or should overall travel budget increase? How much? So I don't know if my colleagues have thoughts about 13.
My first thought is if it's been 30, we take it up to 40 and say that's both.
Okay, thoughts?
Fine with that. I would say 45, but I'm 40. I
That's fine.
think that really this is going to be for the finance committee ultimately, because, we don't have the context of the overall budget, but I would see it increase some amount, and I'm fine with that.
45 is up to.
Okay, well, I'm in the opposite direction. I just feel I think we should keep it at the, so, we'll have to disagree on this one.
So
But-
councilors, one thing for you to consider is that should you need additional funding, you could look to use your contingent account. That's one of the reasons it's there. That's an annual allocation of $125,000.
Okay.
So you do have the 30,000 or approximately 30,000, I think, in terms of your baseline. But you could always draw on that. But we've done this year, frankly. So you didn't even have a travel budget.
And in the new hand you adopted on Monday, you did update the expenditures for city council contingency funds process. So there's two notes that I want to put here. So you're in your updated policy, you have requests for expenditures of so contingency funds up to $10,000 should be made by mayor and vice mayor. And then there's a process to include it for if council members disagree. And then expenditures over $1,000 require an action by a city council motion. So that's in there. The other referrals that you do have on your list of referrals from council on your handbook is the notion of the additional allocation of some of the contingency funds to each council member to use how the council member may see fit. So I just wanted to offer those two things because they are kind of relevant to the dollar amounts you're discussing here.
So
I think, but just one other thing on, I think by definition, we have to come up from 30 to something. Even if it's only 35, because basically we're opening up a situation where no longer do council members have to pay for it out of pocket. And if we're authorized travel, it's more than what we've been doing. So, I mean, even if it's 5, that's sort of the right direction.
well, I guess my thought is that we just travel less domestically, right? We trade off cities we go to. Maybe we don't go to Kansas, we go to
I'm okay with that.
Stockton, right? Or wherever it is.
I say have a slightly different, because I don't think this redistributing the pie, I think is increasing the pie, because some of the things we do domestically, like the conference that to us as new council members, I found very valuable. And I would want to carve that back. And so we have had a mayor who's been paying out of his pocket to go do some of these international trips that we think are valuable. And we then have a mayor who can't. I wouldn't want to see us not do that. I think that inherently necessitates we increase it by some amount if we do want to pay international travel, and I think we should.
Okay, so we're probably gonna have to split one. You guys are probably gonna help me. So you guys should, if it's not too high, I might agree, but if it's a lot more, I would not agree. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about now, like what figure you guys are thinking.
I would stick with 40, because
I would too.
So let's 40 on this one. Okay, then let's go to 14. 14. I'll talk about that. So yeah, I think it's actually China is a really great second, right? It's a way to justify, and if one else goes on a trip and it's not really justifiable, it looks like it's a boondoggle, this public know, right? Transparency. So I think I like the idea you suggested. So that's here. Anyone want to know more about 14?
I would rather do this afterwards to report on action, as opposed to just sort of whistleblowers. You say, Councilor X just returned from the climate action conference in Paris and reported such and such and such and such. So it seems more productive that way when reporting on.
See, so report it, have it reported when it comes back.
Yeah.
Before. Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We could say what did you do there, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Just
like
I'm
that.
going on a trip.
That's a good idea.
Here what the outcomes were.
Yeah. Okay.
And referring back to the policy procedures document you adopted on Monday, there is a piece in there where you are supposed to report back. It hasn't historically been done very much. So that is something that came up in discussion of just using maybe even the councilor comments announcement section of agenda, using to report something just like what Councilmember Lowry just referred.
So I guess what I'm saying is I like what he's saying, but I think it's something that we publish our expenses so that people can see what happened, right? So it's a really good transparency. And they see what was said, like, hey, we did this, that, or whatever, right? But sorry, you were gonna say something.
Well, I was just going to say that I really like where this is going. I would like to see it in the form of a reminder, council members to report out after trips at our council meetings, member updates. Perhaps there's an informational item at the bottom of the packet about where we went and what we did. I think you would suggest that the dollar amount be there. I think it's available if people want to get it. I don't know if we want to put it there. Could put a total amount. I think since those are posted on the website, it's inherently on the website. I don't know that we want a special area for it. I think that makes too big a lot of it. But if it, maybe there's just some sort of addendum that, council member Lau went to Topeka to find out about affordable housing and, or something.
Yeah, I concur with your approach as you outlined it there. I don't think we want to, the point of doing it is we're making judgment that it's worthwhile for the city. And the way to get that across to the citizens, and they can make judgment on it themselves, is to report what happened and what we. So the price of the plane ticket isn't really relevant.
Okay.
And I see creating a whole area of the website to report on this, because it's going to happen twice a year. So
Yeah, no, I totally. So I think we're all in violent agreement on this one as well. So I think we're good. So maybe what we could do now is we could listen to a motion for this part and then, or show to 16 first. What do you guys think? Want to try to cover anything under 5? Or do you guys have anything else you want to add?
I just think we all understand that it's inherently on the website, but to the extent, I know we're not crafting exact language here, but I guess I would want 14 to not be, I'd say include council member travel expenses in the report. Readout, post trip readout or something and then.
He's saying include expenses?
Or total expense. No, not the, I agree with you. The ticket or the cup of coffee is kind of, not worth it, but sorry, council, I don't know whether they call you Ed or some member in context, but were you suggesting we not do that?
I was suggesting that that's not really relevant, because if you spend 3 days we've been talking about the rest of Vancouver, you report on what you did and whether it cost, 2,000 or 3,000 or 1,500, there was not 20,000. And what you're reporting on is this is the work that's done. So I don't feel like that's something that we want to be pushing, because I think it almost makes it, I don't say too visible, but almost emphasizing the cost as opposed to the benefit. That's kind of my turn.
Well, I think we should publish it. I mean, I agree the amounts present makes sense, but the total I think makes sense. Like amount in days. So the public could see that, hey, you didn't see afterwards Carl for 10 days or like just so that we get a sense of that we're being responsible with their money. So that's why I think it's important to have the total plus the days. And all the other things probably don't matter. So I mean, depending on people's feeling, we may have to split one, but
just one thing for suggestion of the committee, you may consider articulating the principle behind this. So what is the ultimate goal? Is it that it's in print? Is it that it is in the public record? And then maybe staff can come back with some more fleshed out opportunities. But if you as a body could at least coalesce on kind of that end goal, it's on a website or that it's in a packet or something, versus it's verbally reported out because you want to make sure that the intentions of trip or the benefits of trip have been articulated. We as staff can back and see if we can't in the future some ways to operationalize that for you.
Well, perhaps we say it's accessible to the public, because I think we've agreed that we don't want it on a separate section on the website. I don't think we have to orally say, oh, and then I spent this much that feels odd. I think what I'm waffling on as council member tonight, I think was, we were talking about having a report out in the packet, like informational part, and then we could talk to it in council member comment period. But in that report out would be the total dollar figure, and he's suggesting as well. I'm off on that because, of course, I have no problem with the transparency. I do take Councilor Lowing's point that it could distract from the good that was done on the very good accomplishments, that one could report on it. It could be a distraction. So I guess my question, I say if it's accessible to the public, and I think it probably already is, and you could perhaps confirm that, and perhaps enough.
Sure. All of these are public records. So the public be able to request any record of council member travel. Perhaps with this, to your point, focusing back on the key principle. So some sort of reporting be perhaps some understanding of the frequency in which that reporting happens. Is it desired it's immediate? Is it an annual thing? Is it a quarterly thing? And then again, we as staff can work, we'll work with the clerk's office and see, is there something perhaps process we could already matriculate this into that we're not thinking of? But again, principles of what the end goal is, and we'll work on details.
I think principle is that we're being stewards of the city's residents' money. And I think that given that we have to comply with the travel procedures, that you use government rates, you don't you don't fly first class, you do the appropriately, fiscally responsible thing, that then they will look at the purpose of the trip. So I think that reporting the purpose of the trip, the length of it, and knowing that we had to comply as we should with these procedures, actually, the more I think about it, I think that's sufficient. And if somebody is very concerned for some reason, they can always access it because it is a public record.
So I think I'm going to be in the minority here. I just feel that public records is actually not easy to get, and a lot of people get turned down. And I think that we should make it easy for people so that we show there's nothing to hide here. But I might be minority on that one, so we can probably split on that one.
Well, the thing is that all of these trips cost money. And, if it's a trip that has a big fee to it and it's New York, you could go to a place in Paris that doesn't have a fee and it's about the same cost. So, the perception out there, if we start publishing it's we're being defensive about taking a trip to something that's outside the borders as opposed to inside the borders, we shouldn't be defensive on any of it. We should be saying this is a good ROI for citizens and we're stewards. That's why I don't think that sort of throwing the number out there, it'd also be a very easy target for somebody to really make some conclusions about that it's a boondoggle just because it's there, and putting the number up makes that easier. And I'd rather have deep dive reports than just cursory.
Okay, so we'll just have to split this one because I'll be outvoted on this one. Okay, good. So anything else you should add or discuss on 5? And should we vote on 5 before we move to 6? Does that seem to make sense to you guys? Because we have a lot already. You good with, okay. Yeah. Okay. So
And if I can just, because we'll be turning this into something to go into the handbook, in general, just to kind of keep the new manicured version of us and have the handbook not look entirely like a Frankenstein, that we would take the intent and form of what you all adopt, and we will create some language that reflects that, and we'll bring that back. So I just wanted to make sure that
makes
was clear.
sense. Okay. Do one of you guys want to make a motion? Okay. So
Are you gonna make it and then split things out?
yeah, exactly.
Why don't you go ahead and do
Okay. So basically, make the motion to have international travel be reimbursement, and basically everything from 6 to 14, except we're going to split out the economic line 8. We're going to split out the total budget amount, and we're going to split out having the expenses public or published. So 8, 13, 14. Yeah, 8, 13, 14.
Yeah, I do just think because the minutes of the meeting, we don't want it to like we're voting against making them available to the public. They are available to the public as
It's published.
Right, so we just need to amend that.
So about the last one, we were trying to stay with the conversation, and if you are splitting it, then yes, it would have to be the prior version. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
On 13, we have to declare that that's total budget, domestic and international.
Yes.
But since our assignment is to do international, it might look like we're saying 40
that's true.
for international.
That's true. Okay, that's good catch.
So total budget domestic. Oh, there we go.
Yep. Okay, I don't know whether we need to write a lot or can we just make them that way and then you guys handle the rest from this. Okay, so do you want to just do a motion by line number? So basically split out 8, 13, and 14 and do everything else.
That worked for me.
Okay, who wants a second then?
I would.
Okay, you want to take the vote? Oh wait, sorry, you got to. Sorry. It's so approving everything on the spreadsheet except 8, 13, 14. Yep. I guess it's really 5 through 7. Okay. Okay, great. Do you want to take the vote?
Well, you need your second up there. I was.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Vink,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing.
Yes.
Motion carries for numbers 6 through 7, 11, 12.
Okay. And then 8, 13, 14.
Councilmember Vink,
Point of order before.
So I guess that's what we want, and then I guess let's see. Actually,
so yeah.
brother, yes, okay. So let's see how we do this. So okay, 8 we could very simple. It's either yes or no, and the answer I think most are probably gonna be no. I think 13 is I'm okay with 30, but my colleagues want to do 5. Actually, if you guys do yeah, that's right. 14 together and then 13
That's what it is. Yeah, it's the other way. These matters are different.
yeah, so we gotta make this clearer. So 8, let's do one at a time. Let's get simple. Let's do 8. So 8 basically there has to be economic benefit. So 8, yes, it has some economic benefit.
Included in the original vote.
No, 8 right now. We'll vote on 8. So 8, there's economic benefit, and then we'll take the vote on it.
Okay.
Probably the word benefits is good to have in there,
That's right. Economic benefit
or even economic if it's required. So
required. Yeah, that's better saying it.
Councilor Lowing.
No.
Councilmember Vinker,
No.
Chair Tanaka.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, and then let's do 13. So 13 is I want 30, they want 40. So let's just take the vote for 40K. So 13 is as written.
Chair Tanaka,
No.
Councilor Vinker.
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, let's do 14 now. So I think yeah. So this would be as written, and then you guys could vote.
So let's clarify the intent now, what it means on the website.
I think as Councilmember Vinker earlier, she said it'd have to be a special section, could be part of the, what would you say? The that's what part you say? Informational report, yeah.
Basically, you're saying in addition to its status as a public record and being accessible, that reason you want to also make it accessible on the city website.
As part of the informational report, yes.
Maybe maybe place for the public with as part of an informational report.
Yeah, point. Can we change, clerk? Okay, is that clean, clear? You guys clear?
Yeah, I'm clear.
Okay, do you want to take the vote?
Councilmember Lowing.
No.
Councilmember Vinker.
No.
Chair Tanaka.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, so let's do the 11, 6. Not 6, 15, whatever it is. Oh, yeah.
Just a process, Jen. So as I mentioned, we'll take this and try to write it as something that we can bring back to the committee, because then you'll need to recommend that blurb
Sure.
to the city council for inclusion in the handbook.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
Or we can take that to
I think
council.
you guys should straight to council.
Okay, that's
I mean, what do you guys think? You guys okay?
So we're gonna draft language based off of the motion that just took, and we can take that straight to the city council as a whole. And just note some of these other things that you had as interest.
Well, there's
this-
two issues. One is we talked about having a second reading amongst ourselves at the next meeting, so that wouldn't go. And secondly, because of the no's, we've got nothing in their place. So we have to come up with alternatives before we have anything to council.
Correct. That was my second question.
Okay.
for you.
Okay, so back then. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's, can we go down spreadsheet? There was one other thing we were supposed to answer, scroll down. Okay, so, 16. Okay, first of all, check, it's 9:54, 6 minutes before the supposed to end. Do you guys want to take this now or hunt for next time?
Number one, thank you for noting that coming up to 10 o'clock. Appreciate that. It seems to me that if we went to limit on this to like 10:15, I'd be okay with it.
I would, and I think maybe we can dispense this fairly quickly.
I agree.
Okay, who wants to, I'm okay to go into 10:15. Actually, let me just message someone real quick. Oh, actually, it's okay. So yeah, who wants to talk about 16?
I would be happy to just observe that I don't know why we would treat the sister cities travel any differently. Because we still want to have the purposes identified above, and we're still going to have the restrictions on the type of travel. And so I don't know. I would need to understand a reason for carve out.
I agree with that. I think we should, I think we talked, I think in some ways this could fit into one. If it's justified, go. If it's not justified, don't go, right? So maybe that's,
I completely concur, because unless there's sort of a second tier classification to this, I think it's part of, we already just discussed.
okay, so really there's no action that we take then. We're done on time.
Well, we didn't add any specific number there, but I think that earlier that probably needs to go to funds.
Oh, well, I mean, we already have a travel budget for the other one, right? So I don't know. I think we've recovered actually.
Okay.
Okay, great, guys. Okay, so I think we're done with 3, and what we'll do is cover the other items at some future agenda.
Okay, as we talk about the future agenda, can we just raise up a couple of procedural questions here?
Yeah, so we're now closed item 3, and now we're on future meeting agenda.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a couple of requests, suggestions, sort of, not requests, in terms of how to process these whenever we get to them. Looking first at number 5, council liaisons boards, and
Wait, which document are you referring?
the first page of
Oh, sorry.
the 7 items, and item number 5, protocol section 2.8.
Oh, you're still talking about item 3.
No, I'm talking about of the 7.
Yeah, you're talking about item 3, which actually covers.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, I thought you were the 3. Sorry. Okay.
No.
Sorry. Okay.
It's the subsections then.
Sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
So number 5 talks about involving board or commission chairs in the process. So we need to have a structure to do that. And you can figure that out as chair if you want, or we can just have a meeting, invite all the chairs of key commissions, one of our meetings, and say, this could be big deal or no deal. You're the ones that need to be considered. I know we're going to get differences of opinion.
I like the idea of inviting other chairs.
Yeah,
I
because they
think
will
that's
have
very-
more involvement in the process,
Absolutely.
and more stake in the outcome.
So can staff, well, we could maybe, I don't know if you have to vote on it, but basically I think it would be great if, I think we have a unanimous opinion here that it would be great for the chair to be here, so they could be invited at that meeting, where that meeting is.
We'll work with the city clerk office on that. If there are specific questions you want to share with them ahead of time, that would be good for us to know as staff.
I think it'd just be the intent.
Okay.
Council wants to know if we're doing the right things with liaisons. And the people that can talk to us that representing their commission is the commission.
Okay.
And also we don't have to do the same for everybody. If Park said we don't have a council member and UAC said it's essential, that's okay too. Do my colleagues agree with that direction?
Yeah.
Okay. And the one I was wanted to talk about was the 8.2 censure language. I would really love to have the attorney or see in her office be involved in drafting something for that instead of us sitting here without legal experience. Sorry, two of us don't have legal experience.
I don't tend to sure people out, so it's good.
Patent censure people.
Well, also about freedom of speech for human rights, I think. So I think this is fraught with difficulty.
I'd have to have almost like short, but a normal staff presentation on what could work that we could talk about editing.
I think that's wise, and I'm happy to assist with that. As I recall, so tell me if I'm remembering this right, council all had an interest in short of censure, other types of options that might be less.
Yeah.
So are you also authorizing me to maybe come up with a few of those, perhaps looking at some other AGs and how they do it, bring those as options as well?
I think that would be great. Yeah.
Better than us being up.
No, I think it's a healthy practice to provide us with alternatives to consider, and I think the thoughtfulness with which we could do that would be very helpful.
And the city council did have some language which the city attorney had looked at before. So we'll see if there's some tweaks to that language we bring back.
Yeah, I think general interest was have it expanded more, and it was the first attempt really to open the topic. And I think it does make sense to treat it more fully, given the importance of it.
Yeah. Okay. It's pretty serious stuff, so we need to get it right. And this, the last, just want to say procedure is that I like the way you called out the one thing that we knew we were going to talk about. And I think that should be the presumption. That's the only one. Because some of these we would want to go back and really be prepared for, I think, through alternatives and so on. And doing that on the fly isn't going to be as productive. So appreciate the call out.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just left it broad like that for if for some reason you were super efficient and you felt that
No,
you
okay.
wanted to cover more. So we'll still make it broad, but we completely understand that you need the time to process these very meaty topics.
Yeah. Thanks.
I might just suggest that at meeting on 2.8 with the board and commission chairs, that we also discuss the item 4, section 2.2, refrain from lobbying board and commission members.
Oh, yeah. Good
Right,
point.
because
Same
there's
time.
sort of couple, how, it's basically all the
we should-
topics,
we should
how do
group-
we
yeah.
interact well with our board commissions?
Yeah, we want to group the stuff to be efficient, so. Good point. Okay, any other comments just before we? Okay, great. Okay, we're officially done with 3. And then we're going back to future things and agendas. Let's see, any comments, questions, thoughts? Otherwise, something really quick. So, I was speaking with the city auditor a few days ago, and the city auditor to have, what was it called again? You wanted to have, let's see. You wanted to add something to the agenda for next week, next time. Task orders, yes, task orders, yes. I think I saw an email back, and I think I had a question, right, or something like that.
We just want to confirm that that agenda was okay. So the proposed agenda for the next meeting, which actually only in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just so you all are preparing yourself mentally for your next regular meeting on May 9th is for the task orders from auditor's office. And she would clearly state what they were. And then there's an equity update, which we moved from today's meeting to the meeting on the 9th. And then if you wanted us to bring one of these procedures protocols item, it's available.
I think we should, like maybe we could talk offline, but maybe one of them, if we're not ready for it, right? Because this attorney work on might take her time to do, so, yeah. So we will, maybe I will figure out, so, good, does that seem reasonable to you guys? Okay, and you're good?
Yes.
Okay, I think we are done at 10:02, so we're done, thank you guys. Actually, last thing before, so, I'm trying to make our meetings efficient, which is why I think the work going on trying to make that spreadsheet, trying to make it easier. So if you guys have suggestions, thoughts of how to, make these meetings as efficient as possible, let me know, right? Anyways, just a little bit of experiment tonight. I don't know what you guys thought about helpful, not helpful. I was hoping that she could do the pros and cons, but I could realize how hard it is for her to do that.
Yeah, I think it was helpful to be able to have a good interchange amongst us without too much structure getting in the way. I do feel like our clerk had yeoman's task tonight.
Yeah.
If there's some way we could be efficient without putting such a burden, that'd be great. I also want to take a minute to thank our public commenters tonight and for such a helpful presentation.
Yep, of course. Anyways, no? Okay, great. We're done. Thank you.